They asked me if I'd talk today instead of tomorrow, and I said sure. I've been feeling really pissed off today. First of all, this is the most self-referentially smug conference that I have been at outside Apple and IBM. But we're not here to speak of the zombies. Power corrupts. Obsolete power corrupts obsoletely. Actually, I think the reason I'm so angry today at this conference is it just brings up so much for me. It gives me such a sense of personal failure when I look at all of you and think of all the things I wanted to have done by now. And I'm sure you all feel that same feeling about lots of things, but perhaps not over quite as long a period. And I'm kind of sorry to go ahead of Nicholas Negroponte, because I would so like to rebut. There are basically three schools of interactive design. Xerox PARC are Alan's, Nicholas's, and mine, and the two of them have gotten all the coverage. So, we'll see. People say to me, "Your vision has come true, isn't it marvelous?" And I say, no, not like this, for God's sake, not like this. I mean, yes, with the latest chips, you can run the same software at 4 times the speed, the same lousy, sickening software. The same bizarre operating systems divided at the consumer level into the ones into MS-DOS, and at the other side the Macintosh Finder, and the now the Macintosh people, of course, consider the PC fascist, and the PC people consider the Macintosh artsy-fartsy, and both, of course, are correct. Throughout the world, we have this extraordinary division between PC people and Macintosh people, which came to a head recently when I found out that two of my close friends, a wonderful couple, they have an open relationship. And he doesn't mind her sleeping with other men, but he does mind her using a Macintosh. And we have this same old model of files. this bizarre computer literacy. We inform and instruct the hopeful and naive that everything has to have a name which is 8.3 characters long, or else has this long Macintosh name. And at the same time, they have to be filed in this very strange directory structure, which bears no... Well, if you're Catholic or have a lot of army experience, the hierarchy makes sense, but otherwise... Now, I've written a piece called The Crime of WYSIWYG, which unfortunately hasn't been published because the magazine got shot out from under me, basically pointing out that what has brought all these poor, hopeful souls into the computer field has been the most hideous thing. The WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. Get? Why, when it's printed out. That's right, folks. WYSIWYG means we're going to make the computer into a paper simulator, which is like flying a 747 on the highway as a bus. And then there's the folly of metaphors. Oh yes, those wonderful things, like the desktop metaphor on the Macintosh. Now, someone actually had to explain to me in what way this resembled a desktop. Because I've never seen a desktop where if you poke the corner of a piece of paper that's sticking out, it jumps to the surface. Or the wonderful garbage can metaphor. The garbage can, of course, is totally intuitive. It means either destroy this or save it. If you want to take out your backup disk, you put it in the garbage can. Of course, intuitive. Whoever thought of that? Okay. Then there's what many people seem to think we are moving toward, that wondrous vision of John Scully's little film yesterday. What's it called? Knowledge Navigator. Yes. First of all, what this told us is that professors in the 21st century will be dingbats. Well, did you just happen to notice what happens with the rainforest? Oh, my God. But worse, the idea that you'll have these little Max Headroom characters on the screen with bow ties who you have to talk to. You have this social relationship to this twittish object. Now, I enjoy talking moose as much as the next fellow, but having to deal socially with inane objects that pretend to understand you and don't is much worse than a cocktail party. It's absolutely unnecessary. It is a counsel of despair. To me, the right model of information management is a globe. Okay, a globe does not say good morning unless you're Pee Wee Herman. A globe keeps you oriented. You can find what you want. You can turn it, and that's it. It is self-explanatory, self-revelatory, with no interface. Okay. The idea of no interface, the concept of what I call virtuality, which not to be confused with Jaren's artificial reality, which I hope we'll have time for and we probably won't, is crucial. Okay. So now we go on to tomorrow's vision of interactive software. Tomorrow's vision of interactive software. Well, look at the hypertext stuff that's out there now. I'm very flattered when people say I invented hypertext. I didn't. I just gave a name to what was inevitable, okay? I mean, hypertext, hypermedia. It was obviously going to happen. And it's just amazing how long it took people to figure this out. But at any rate, if you look at the stuff they're now doing under the name of hypertext, it wrenches the gut. Because, to me, the very essence of hypermedia is going to be orientation and clarity. Orientation and clarity. So people can understand. The idea is to raise people's mental level back up to what it was before television, okay? I mean, in the 40s, I grew up in the 40s, and we talked. We had vocabularies, all right? And today, it's like, well, gee, I don't know, man, hey. And I have a friend who invented a single-valued logic. The value was, hey. We must get back to literacy, understanding, and clarity. And instead, what do they use HyperCard for? This wonderful tool. What do they use it for? To ring bells, flap cartoons, and in general, decorate rather than clarify. Okay? And this and the style in which you see the Macintosh being used is absolutely horrifying. You've got to figure out all the icons on the screen. The screen is so full, so cluttered with icons that you cannot see the material. There's the bird's nest, the yo-yo, the high-button shoe, the frying pan, each of which has to be explained and separately understood. And, of course, because they have the frying pan metaphor or whatever, then they have to stick to this frying pan metaphor rather than having a clear conceptual design, which is what they should have had in the first place. Someday I want to design the Macintosh they meant to do. Okay. So finally we have this other picture of the worst aspect of the Macintosh, and this is quite serious, is that where we've gotten to with the Mac, all right, the ideal, long since left behind, was that in the Macintosh design we would have a way of reasonably transferring materials between a number of different formats, text and graphics. And what do we have instead? Each software developer gets leverage from creating yet another obscure file format into which cannot be interoperable with the rest. So we see an ever-feathering tree in which new file formats are invented every day for uselessly differentiated new features instead of some world in which applications can share material, and in which the developments and inventions of one software designer can contribute to the developments and to the environment that someone else adds to later on. What if it could be different? I mean, what if we were back at the dawn of time, say 1960? What if someone had seen it completely differently? In fact, someone did. I'm going to report on that. Because I want you to see the world in a slightly different way. I want you to look forward to the world that can and will be, in which computers become the clarifying and unifying devices that allow us all to share. Now, many good things have happened. I will say this for the Macintosh: it has become the touchstone and a hearth for people around the world concerned with the future, concerned with ecology. It's amazing. I was able in Helsinki in the depths of night to borrow a Macintosh. Gorbachev has a Macintosh. Hey, this can't be all bad. So what we need, however, is a way of sweeping away the inanity and creating a shareable universe on a broader scale. Okay, so a little about my background. I'll talk very fast. I grew up on very ultra-sophisticated circumstances on Washington Square. My parents were actors and divorced before I was born, so I was left with my grandparents, which worked out very well. And I grew up in World War II and hated school, I'm sure, more than anyone in this room. On one occasion, I sharpened a small screwdriver to stab my teacher with, but got within 2 feet of him and thought better of it. The next day, however, I dropped out of 7th grade. And so I know what it feels. On that day, on that burning day, which sort of cut off my childhood, I realized that most people were fools, most authority was malignant, God did not exist, and everything was wrong. And these have been my guiding beliefs since that time. Now, some people retreat and say, all right, I'm just going to get mine. And I say, no, I want things to be right. And so, like a madman, I proceed to try to change the world, not in any image I can figure out, but piece by piece into something that might work. I was most inspired by a film I saw when I was a kid. Well, before I was 10, I was already playing hooky to hang out in bookstores and go to foreign movies. I'd seen more foreign films by the time I was 10 than most Americans see in a lifetime, I think. And I was reading Corbusier and a lot of designers at this time. My early heroes included Raymond Loewy and designers like that. And then at 12, it galvanized just after I dropped out of school. And my heroes when I was 12 were Walt Disney, Buckminster Fuller. There was an article in the June 1949 issue of the Reader's Digest on Bucky Fuller, and I read it every day. Because here was a man who invented his own geometry. You're allowed to do that? Wow! And who was concerned about the future. So on the other hand, what I'm getting at is that this was an ideal background for what later turned up. Because I took a computer course 2 years later in graduate school, and this was essentially like being struck by lightning, because as soon as I saw in that 7090 manual that you could hook a screen to a computer, it was, of course, this will be the new cinema. It will be interactive. And so in the fall of 1960, I began designing interactive software for the personal computer in a style totally different from anybody else's, and still totally different from anybody else's. And it is very painful to me that none of these designs have seen implementation as yet, except for one obscure word processor, which had the best sound effects of any word processor. I do believe that the prototype for tomorrow's office software may best be seen in the game of Pac-Man, and not in your hoity-toity... somebody told me the other day he hadn't heard the word hoity-toity. What would your generation know? Some stuck-up office systems like from your more pompous developers. Now, Pac-Man, you see, it's self-revealing. You get immediate gratification. That is, you're using it usefully within the space of 2 quarters. Very few people have read the manual for Pac-Man. It was silk screened on the first models and then quietly dropped. And the ramifications are self-revealing. They are progressive ramifications of the already seen principles. And so, by experimentation, you see how these ramifications carry themselves out and how you may use the system. And that, to me, is the model of how software should work. Anyway, okay, so how then did I think about the handling of information that is completely different from what later came to be the standard model? Now, all right, on the one side, the very simple vision was that we would have a new form of writing, which I later called hypertext, which is essentially branching text, branching graphics, which would interact with you. And by the way, I take a thoroughly auteur position on this, that you cannot design software by committee any more than you can make a movie by committee. Now, you see, the Hollywood principle is that every cameraman thinks he's a director. And how that has transposed into the current Hollywoodization of Silicon Valley is that everyone's a software designer, don't you know? And everything is done by either committees or determined individuals, usually greatly lacking in talent, and people plumping for their favorite feature, which means that everything is, it's pin the tail on the donkey, and everything has the disease of featureitis, except for a few. Well, another way, consider the problem of integrated software. What I'm talking about, by integrated software, I mean you should sit down and it should be one set of things, one sweeping structure over which you have complete control, complete, simple, calm control. Now, people say, oh, you mean integrated software. Well, you see, integrated software is these days, they think it's a combination of word processing, spreadsheet, and database, right? The Tin Woodman, the Cowardly Lion, the Scarecrow, or hamburger, French fries, and shake, right? I mean, that's food, right? To people who've grown up in knowing only McDonald's, food, okay? It means hamburger, fries, and a shake. So if you try to tell them about cuisine, they say, cuisine? What could that be? Cuisine. Well, you could put the hamburger and the fries into the shake. That's framework. Or you could put the hamburger and the fries and the shake side by side on a little perfectly fitted tray. That's enable or ability or something. Or you put the hamburger on your head, put the French fries up your nose, and pour the shake over yourself. That's Lotus Symphony. But no, I'm talking about something else. When I say integrated software, I don't mean combining 3 stylized and restricted modes of operation which have no intrinsic fit. I mean creating a tapestry of capabilities and work circumstances that is a unified whole, okay? Now, obviously we need constructs, and the construct I came up with, I don't know when it started, but I published this in 1965, called the Zippered list. And this is interesting because it's a highly general construct, and it's not quite like anything else, and it led to everything else, including the Xanadu structure of today, which we'll get to. Okay, basic idea of a zippered list is you have a number of items, and you have another zippered list, which can be a number of items, or it can just be a long scroll of text. And you can have linkages or the same material appearing in both. And what does that mean in the terms of the way you're going to look at it? Well, you're going to look at it, ideally, on a screen that's divided into 2 panes. And when the left pane is the independent text, then the corresponding portions will pop up in the right pane, and vice versa. So you can have different structures with corresponding and equivalent parts, and view any part of them, and by taking any part as the center, see the parts that correspond with it. This is my fundamental model for everything, because it can be used for for outlining. This can be the outline. It can be used for annotation. It can be used for database. It can be used for a whole lot of things, and in doing so allows you a kind of smooth screen control. Now, I'm not wedded to zips, but it is a very simple, zips is the short way of calling it, but it's a very simple model of handling these. I understand people have become interested in zippered lists lately. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so this basic construct and the notion of side-by-side intercomparison and viewing. By the way, the most fundamental capability that computer screen windows should have does not yet exist, and that is the ability to show with lines what corresponds between windows. Why not? Is this available in X Windows? Is it available in NeWIS? Is it available in any of the existing windowing packages? No! Why would you want to use that? So, people have always said, why would you want that? I remember back in '64, the IEEE conference, I wanted lowercase. Well, who would ever want lowercase on a screen? And so forth and so on. For my own work, and especially the intellectual work I wanted to do, I needed zips. I needed zippered lists. And if I act a little crazy, it's because the most fundamental tool in the computer field that as far as I'm concerned, does not exist yet. Why, guys? It's been published for 25 years. Let's get on it. No. Obviously, I've been working on it too, and that's a different story. The other part of it, of course, was that I was I was very much influenced by Marcel Proust. I wanted to have a unified oeuvre. I wanted all of my work to be one unified hypercube, and essentially zip structured. And so when people congratulate me about the books I've written, it gives me great pain because they're not linked side by side, and the connections that they were intended to have in my mind aren't there. So it's extremely painful. Okay, so much for that. Slides? Great. These are just a few examples that were lying around the house of horrible designs. This is oh, that's nice. That's backwards. Sorry about that. But in any case, it doesn't make much difference in this case. I bought it for $100, so what the hell? But it's impossible to figure out how to use it. So this is another radio I bought on sale. Here are the instructions. There's a sign here saying, "Do not turn off." There's a very simple reason for that sign. If it's turned off, it takes about 5 or 10 minutes to figure out how to turn it back on again. This is the latest telephone we have at Autodesk. I have given up on putting colors on hold. I simply say, I will call you back. This is another model. Unfortunately, the white area is all the instructions for how to use the separate little buttons to put people on hold and get them off hold. And once again, I've just given up entirely. Now, we had a voicemail system at Autodesk, and it wasn't too bad. It was probably designed by a high school student, so at least it made some kind of sense. But last week, they put in a voicemail system with more features. Let me read to you what it takes to forward a message on this voicemail system, which is called Audix. It was clearly designed by a graduate engineer. In order to forward the message, listen to the message, press 1 and 2, speak your comment, press sharp pound, type the address, then press pound, then press sharp pound. Intuitive. This is my microwave oven. It has a dial. If you look at most microwave ovens, the control panel looks roughly like a crossword puzzle. And you're as much in danger of programming something to happen next week as of getting your food out soon. I drive an automatic shift, okay? Not because I can't drive a shift car, but because I don't like to. I think that the conceptual structure of driving has to do with getting around the other cars and not with your aesthetic relationship to the cylinders. The problem then is how to create interactive software, and most people don't get it. They don't understand that basically interactive software is a branch of filmmaking. There is no question, because what is movie making? And that's what this conference is about. Movie making is the design of the user's experience. Hardware scarcely matters except for speed, right? Stop giving us these additional features. Interactive software design is basically a branch of movie making. And in fact, what they teach programmers has absolutely nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing. Just as every cameraman thinks he's a film director, so too do the technicalities of operating a camera have nothing to do with directing a film. And yet we mistake the two. People who are trained in programming know how to make the do loops go round, and consequently they think they are uniquely empowered to design the user's experience. Wrong-o. It's entirely possible that some of them have the talent, but generally unlikely on a statistical basis. People don't talk much about talent these days. They talk about training. Hey, talent's very important. I mean, consider Walt Disney. This was a great man. This was a man who really understood design. Design, by the way, I define simply as the arrangement and adjustment of features to achieve a mix of goals, okay? So choosing the mix of goals, among which are the various aspects and ramifications of the user's experience. This is the trick. Now, when Walt, who invented the storyboard, would sit with his gang, he would reenact Pluto chasing his tail or whatever, and if you look at what is packed into any 6 seconds of that stuff, compared with, say, the Flintstones, the difference is orders of magnitude. Just that there's one sequence of Goofy putting on skis with a sweater, for example, every movement of which is brilliantly choreographed. This was Disney. I mean, he did this himself with his group, but he was the design center. Charles Chaplin, there was a talent. Or of course Orson Welles. I got through reading the biography Citizen Wells, which is very interesting and very painful in some ways. Okay, Wells took over radio at the age of 20, I think. He was on 100 shows a week, hiring an ambulance with sirens screaming to go from one part of New York City to another, from one show to another. And at 23, he went to Hollywood. Did he go to film school? He made Citizen Kane. Okay. So what I'm saying is that auteurism is the only way to go to get good stuff. You want to find top talent and give that person a full and final cut, because that way you get it. And instead, we have this committee stuff. Now, very often, one person can do a piece of software all by him or herself, and so that cut is usually very good, but then more people have to be hired, and gradually the thing deteriorates into unclarity. Okay. Virtuality, then, is my term, and this term I've been using for, what, 10 years, 15? Virtuality consists of two things, conceptual structure and feel, and so everything has a virtuality, virtuality being the opposite of reality. Wrong one. Right one. Architecture has a virtuality, and that is how it seems. The virtuality of something is its seeming, the conceptual structure and feel, not what holds it up. And so architects, your grander architects, strive for a concept and an effect. But there are, in turn, incomprehensible architectures which have no unifying principles, and maybe they look good to some people, but what good are they really underneath? I've got stories about that we don't have time for. Clear architectures, like, for example, Frank Lloyd Wright's spiraling teacup of the Guggenheim, have a remarkable grandeur to them. Okay, And the details become clear, the ramifications, when you understand the big idea. So, point one, things can be remembered if they follow clearly visualizable principles, and it doesn't matter which principles. You can have any kinds of organizing principles for software especially. So, interactive systems is a new kind of movie. And virtuality of a movie is many shots integrated into a psychological whole. The conceptual structure is the plot and the personalities of the characters, and the feel, of course, is the atmosphere and everything else that makes the film. And the unifying person here, Griffith with his hat. Okay. Detailed, it's interesting points. First, the cameramen directed, and finally it took them about 12 years before they discovered the directors. Anybody can point a camera, it doesn't matter. Anybody can write a program, very few can do it, blah, blah, blah. The literary paradigm. The author proposes, you write anything you like, and the reader disposes, and this is how it ought to be. So the writer can design your experience, but you can turn the page. This is absolutely vital. And when I see what goes on in computer-assisted instruction where they chain you to the desk, the computer will not do anything until you give the right answer. Thank you. Thank you. The purpose of computers is human freedom. Thank you. Okay, so here's the virtuality reality continuum. A movie is all virtuality. At the other end is a fishhook, which has none. You don't want the victim to see it. And in the middle you have jewelry and cars. You see, a car has to function. But all cars have the same conceptual structure, left, right, back, and forward. It's amazing how people can get fascinated by cars. My God. I know people who pay more for their cars than they pay for their computers. I talked about zip structure, and you notice there were two kinds of links between the elements of the zip. One was simply the vanilla link, and the other was the equals, meaning the same material could appear in more than one zip. The same idea has become the structure of what we expect to be one of the revolutionary movements of this coming decade, of this present decade. And I will try to inculcate you with some of the ideology of that system and send you out of here with your heads spinning, humming a tune. Everybody talking about CD-ROM and how wonderful it is for publishing. I do not join in this chorus. Because you see, with a CD-ROM, the good news is you can have, what, 40 million bytes on your desktop, 400, whatever. And the bad news is you can only have 40 million bytes on your desktop, or 400 or whatever. For example, you can buy, the good news, you can buy the Oxford English Dictionary on a CD-ROM. The bad news, well, read a book on the screen and try to look up a word in the Oxford English Dictionary that's on your CD-ROM. Oh no, you can only read the Oxford English Dictionary with our software. What we are seeing is a new balkanization. Everywhere the barriers are going up between different pieces of software. Amongst all this stuff, gatekeepers, the computer people, the arch hackers, the guys who are great with their fingertips on the keyboard, they are the jailers of our new world. Playtime now. This way. And what we're seeing is closed hypermedia, finished for all time, being put out on separate disks under separate rules. Now, of course, everybody has a right to do this, but the fact that you cannot annotate. Now, if you own a book of paper, you may write in the margin and use sticky notes, indeed, to extend it out as far as you like. Whereas with your CD-ROMs of today, we are locking you into just what was said by just those people at just that time. The alternative I propose is open hypermedia, where you'll be able to annotate, where democratically we will all be able to contribute, and creating the framework in which that's possible, just going to speed up a little bit here, is the objective of the day. Okay, what we're working toward, let's look backward from the year 2020, the 2020 vision, In the year 2020, 1 billion people around the globe at their screens, each able to withdraw with automatic royalty from the great corpus of stored human documents. I do not say knowledge, I say documents. A document is an information package created by someone at a given time, which has a given point of view, okay? None of this fiddly-dee about how the computers are going to understand it, they're going to sift it out, they're going to know, and we'll just sort of press the buttons and be happy. No. We are going to have access to documents and thereby return. Well, I don't want artificial intelligence. I want people coming back to what was their heritage of intelligence. Okay. In this global system, 1 billion people able to reach, and each adding a document an hour, let us say, to the system. Now, the only way to do this is with a single program, isomorphically running this throughout a network, where your local user hooks onto the local node or whatever node he can get onto, and we can withdraw, can call forth any document from the whole thing. Okay? And now this very model, this model descends from the zip model because basically it means two things. Not only do you have the separable documents, but you have links between them and the last feature, which nobody else has got, transclusion. Transclusion. One document transcludes portions of another when it logically includes them but does not copy them. Okay, in other words, you write a document, you want to quote something, you make a hole, a transclusion hole, which has a pointer saying where to go and get it. This solves the copyright problem. It solves a very large number of problems of attribution and organization. This means that the user in home or office will be able to find the origins of things, boilerplate can be correctly identified, and so forth and so on. And on the global scale, we essentially have a unified tissue of storage, many different servers, holding public documents with published links and private documents and private links. Very, very simple model. It's got to be simple if it's going to be a worldwide shared medium. We are looking for developers who wish to participate in this new world, a world in which data structures may be shared across applications by different authors. We want to see a world of data that is shared like the world outside. And every different application is just a window into this world to which we can all participate. And this is done through various mechanisms. The link can be one-ended and is used for marking material in the bytes. So the overall vision of publication, then, is of not merely, the construct is that of the document. You see, we understand what a document is. And what is literature? Literature is a procession of linked documents. This definition applies both to, say, the literature of biology or global literature. All of it has been a linked whole, but we haven't been able to get at it. What happens if we can get at it? Whole new vistas of pluralistic points of view vying as they should in open forum. And essentially a world where, if everything is not perfect, at least we can get at things more freely. Now, Autodesk, to the surprise of not a few people in the computer field, okay, Project Xanadu began with my work in the fall of 1960, and in fact, the term project I projected is roughly the Xanadu product that will be released sometime this year. And that will be a back-end server for shared and linked material. It has been designed for this global publishing application, and with very top people designing it, especially Mark Miller and Roger Gregory, and the rest of the crew we acquired in 1977 and some more. And the other part of the Xanadu project is called Public Access, tentatively called Public Access Xanadu, or PAX, a rather nice acronym. And I will be running that, and our plan is that roughly around January of 1993, Public Access Xanadu will open for publication with automatic royalty. The first Xanadu stand is projected for approximately January of 1993, as I've said, probably in Palo Alto. We will not open the first one until we are basically ready to franchise. The first area will be Northern California. We will then, 6 months later, open up in some small country where we can make a big splash, such as Netherlands or Australia or New Zealand, and proving the international viability of the concept, and 6 months later come back and go to some heartland state like Oklahoma or Alaska, thus showing it's not merely an elite toy. This basically means that if you want to start a Xanadu account, you will have to present yourself in person at one of the Xanadu stands in these zones, after which you can phone in from anywhere in the world. We want our franchisees to get extremely rich immediately, and because we want market share, and expecting now that perhaps the most storage will be see, people say, well, where are you going to get all the storage? It will be paid for. To publish something, you pay 3 years of disc rental and sign a few things, and bingo. Anyone in the world can take out fragments. There are no opening screens. There are no screens because it is simply an accessibility mechanism for any arbitrary visualizations or applications you choose to use. And of course, there's no limit as to data types. We will be shoehorning in separate data types and releasing the data type definition mechanisms so that people can create and share arbitrary data types. For example, zooming graphics. One of the crucial things is to be able to zoom in on a bitmap so that you can receive a megapixel, which is then subdivided into 4. Then so each of these pixels is subdivided into 4. You can zoom as you like and cut off when you've had enough bits. Okay, so that's the scheme. You won't find many idealists with a timetable for worldwide conquest, but why not? One of the movies when I was a kid, which influenced me most, was a British film called Breaking the Sound Barrier, and it was a great moment. It was about the young designer, you see, who designs fine aircraft that can go faster than any before, and we send a test pilot up in it, and he says, I'm getting buffeting. She's starting to shake. Something's going wrong. I pull the stick back. She keeps nosing forward. Click. Radio blackout. He's crashed. Other pilot goes up in the second plane. Buffeting. My God. She keeps nosing down. I keep pulling the stick. Click. So nothing for it, but our hero, the designer, must go up in the third and last plane. Says, buffeting. Oh my God, she's not responding, she's going forward. I'm going to push the stick forward. No, Jack, you can't do that. Yes, I'm going to push the stick forward. And of course he pulls out smoothly. And saw this movie and I said, yep. I'm going to be the guy that dares to push the stick forward. Turns out in Chuck Yeager's biography, he said, hell, if I'd pushed the stick forward, I'd be dead. A lot of people I know, we've just heard from some people here that it's going to be sweetness and light, and they're going to repeal the business cycle, repeal the menstrual cycle, just deliver cookies and milk at 5 p.m. every day by Concord. I would like to visit that planet sometime. The planet where I live, they appear to be engaged in a global experiment to see how much pollution is compatible with mammalian life. An experiment which will end when we exceed the threshold. And still, I know a lot of guys who, out there working for a BMW. I don't want a BMW. I want a goddamn planet. And we have got to have systems. We have got to have ways we are going to get through the negotiations and simulations of tomorrow so that we can find our way back to Kansas and back to the green before it's too late. Thank you.